Today we are going to discuss a question of sociology optional that has come in 2025 mains. That is third A question, compare capability deprivation approach with that of social capital deprivation approach in understanding chronic poverty. This is a 20 marks question, so you have to write in around 250 to 300 words. Now, whenever we are writing answer of a question, first we have to recall what are the things that we are going to write, right? For example, in this case, right, first we have to define chronic poverty. Chronic poverty first. Then we have to define what is social capital deprivation, and next capability deprivation. Capability deprivation. Right? I will explain first chronic poverty, but before explaining social capital deprivation and capability deprivation approach, I would like to introduce with you with how the concept of poverty has evolved over the time. Right? So chronic poverty means poverty of individual or group that continues generation after generation. Generation after generation. So a person is in poverty, his father was also in poverty and his grandfather was also in that situation. Such type of poverty is known as chronic poverty. For example, in India, if you see the poverty of lower castes, they suffer from chronic poverty as they are not the owner of land, right? Their status in the society is very low. They are socially excluded from the society and so on, right? So generation after generation, they have suffered poverty. So they are actually suffering from what is known as chronic poverty, right? Now we talk about social capital deprivation and capability deprivation approach. Before that, as I said, we'll talk about evolution of concept of poverty, right? We can discuss this in 4 stages: pre-industrial society, then Victorian period, which goes from 1837 to 1907. Then we have third, 20th century till 1990s, and then fourth, post liberalization period, right? Now in pre-industrial society, poverty was considered as natural phenomenon, natural or divine phenomenon. Means there was a general understanding in the society that a person is poor, a group is poor due to divine decree, and the condition cannot be alleviated. The simple thing is that it was not considered as social problem. Next came Karl Marx in 19th century, who identified poverty as an artificial phenomenon and poverty as a social problem. That is, it is a man-made phenomenon. Masses are poor because they are dominated, subordinated, and exploited by a elite class of people who own the forces of production or who own the property, right? We all know that Marx propounded a revolutionary ideology, and because of that, labor class started getting mobilization. So that put pressure on the governing elites, the ruling elites, to give attention to the problem of the poverty of the masses. And this begins in Victorian period, and the approach that was adopted, that is known as subsistence idea of poverty. Subsistence idea of poverty. If people are lacking in nutritional support, then they are said to be poor. But in this case, it was criticized for treating human being as an animal. So the next came basic need idea. Basic need idea, that it was not only nutritional requirement, but there are certain other requirements like housing, clothes, right, productive asset, tools, land, etc. So that was characterized as basic need idea. Then came what is known as relative deprivation approach. Relative deprivation approach, right? Now, relative deprivation approach considers issue of poverty as dynamic, meaning what is the definition of poverty? It has to vary from countries to countries and from time to time. Over the period, people's need changes. So it says absolute, it completely refutes the absolute poverty idea. What it says, that what is the criteria for identifying a person or a group as poor in India cannot be the same for America or some African country, right? And what is the poverty definition today should not be taken as for granted of 50 years from now. Now, this relative deprivation approach, this social capital deprivation approach and capability deprivation approach are the offshoots of relative deprivation approach, right? You can say relative deprivation, right? It has two offshoots. One is social capital deprivation approach, and second is called as capability deprivation. capability deprivation. As far as social capital deprivation is concerned, it is linked with the work of Pierre Bourdieu, Coleman, and this is the handiwork of Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen. Right? Now, if you look at the social capital approach, it is about network. If people have network, then they possess social capital, and that helps them in employment opportunity, that helps them in accessing the government funding, that helps them accessing the microfinance. And this way, what happens, these people work for sustainable development, sustainable treatment of poverty. Means poverty alleviation is to be sustainable, it requires social capital, right? This particular social capital deprivation approach, it takes into account the structure of the society as a whole, and that's why it is linked with the concept of social exclusion, right? For example, in India, scheduled caste, they were socially excluded. They were not allowed to participate in the mainstream economic activity. They were not allowed to own land, and they did not have any connect with the ruling elites, and that's why they suffered from chronic poverty, right? Now here what you find, to empower them with social capital, self-help group approach, self-help group approach was taken up by the government of India. What happens in this self-help group? A small number of people, 10 to 20 people, they come together and they pursue certain productive activity, right? Now what happens when they come together? Their bargaining power increases, skill development takes place, leadership emerges, and therefore they are able to connect with the wider society, the political structure of the society, right? So this is the social capital deprivation approach, and this helps in building a network that provides them employment opportunity, that provides them access to the finances, that provides them with the access to the modern technology, and so on. So this is a sustainable method of poverty alleviation. But as far as Amartya Sen capability deprivation approach is concerned, it describes at individual ability. Basically, it emphasizes on education. If people are not educated, they cannot exploit their capability. And therefore, education is the most important tool to improve the capability attainment of a person, right? So basically, it talks about education, because education brings awareness, it helps them in skilled work, right? It helps them in connecting with the larger society, the political structure, and therefore they are able to achieve things for which they are able to. And that's why it is called capability. A person should be able to exploit the fullest potential of his or her ability, and that if he is not able to do it, then it is called capability deprivation. Right? Thank you.